I used to believe that growing old meant becoming invisible, not weak, not helpless, just unseen, the kind of invisible where your opinions are politely nodded at, then quietly ignored, where your memories matter more than your present, where people smile at you the way they do at something fragile, something already halfway gone. But I wasn't gone. Not even close. Every morning, I woke up in the same house I had spent 42 years paying for. Every corner of it held a piece of my life. The chipped kitchen counter where my children had done their homework, the hallway where I measured their height year after year, the living room where birthdays and arguments and reconciliations all blurred into one long, complicated love story. This house wasn't just walls and a roof. It was proof that I had built something, that I had survived, that I had mattered. And I took care of it the same way I always had, slowly, carefully, stubbornly independent. Yes, my hands shook sometimes. Yes, I had to sit down more often than I used to. And yes, there were moments, quiet ones, late at night, when I wondered how much longer I could keep doing everything on my own. But wondering isn't the same as surrendering. And I wasn't ready to surrender, not my home, not my life, not yet. The first time my daughter suggested it, she said it gently, too gently. Have you ever thought about getting a little extra help? I remember the way she stood in the doorway, arms folded, eyes scanning the room, not with affection but with assessment, like she wasn't seeing a home, like she was evaluating a situation. I manage just fine, I told her, and I meant it. She smiled. That soft, careful smile people use when they've already decided you're wrong. I know you do. You've always been strong. But it doesn't hurt to plan ahead, right? Plan ahead. That phrase stayed with me long after she left. Because it didn't feel like planning. It felt like positioning. At first, I brushed it off. Children worry. That's what they do when they see their parents aging. It's natural. It's love even in its own awkward way. But then my son started visiting more often, not together, never together. One would come, then the other, like they had agreed on some silent schedule. He'd walk through the house slowly, just like his sister had, noticing things I hadn't thought twice about. You should fix that step, he said once, pointing to the back porch. It's been like that for years, I replied. Exactly, he said, that word again, not concern, judgment. I began to notice the questions, subtle at first. Do you still handle all your finances yourself? Where do you keep important documents? Have you updated your will recently? Each one wrapped in casual conversation, but none of them casual. They weren't asking about me. They were asking about what I had and what would happen to it. Still, I told myself I was imagining things, because the alternative, the idea that my own children might see me as something to manage, was too painful to accept. So I held on to the version of them I remembered. The ones who needed me, not the ones who were quietly planning for a life without me in it. The suggestion came again a few weeks later. This time, it wasn't so gentle. We were sitting at the kitchen table, the same table where I had packed their lunches, helped with homework, listened to their teenage heartbreaks. Now they sat across from me like strangers in a meeting. We've been talking, my daughter began, that word, we, a decision already made. I'm listening, I said carefully. We think it might be time for you to consider a more supportive environment. Environment, such a clean phrase for something that felt anything but. I have a supportive environment, I said, glancing around my kitchen. This house. Son leaned forward. Mom, this house is becoming too much for you. No, it isn't. It is, he insisted. You just don't want to admit it. It was not concern, correction. They weren't asking anymore. They were telling. I've lived here longer than either of you have been alive, I said, my voice steady. I think I know what I can handle. Stretched across the table. And for the first time, I saw something in their faces that I couldn't explain. Not worry, not love, impatience, like I was taking too long to understand something obvious. We're just trying to help, my daughter said, but it didn't feel like help. It felt like pressure, soft, persistent, tightening, like hands closing around something they intended to take. The visits became more frequent after that, less conversation, more observation. They noticed everything, the way I moved, the way I forgot small things, the way I paused before standing up. Every moment of weakness magnified, every sign of strength ignored. And slowly, carefully, they began to rewrite the story of my life, not as someone capable, but as someone declining, not as someone independent, but as someone in need. It didn't happen all at once. That would have been easier to fight. Instead, it happened in layers. A suggestion here, a concern there, a quiet comment that lingered just long enough to plant doubt. Until even I began to question myself. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was slipping, maybe this house, this life was becoming too much. But every time that thought crept in, I would look around at the walls, the floors, the memories, and I knew this wasn't about what I could handle. It was about what they wanted to control. The breaking point didn't come with an argument. It came with an incident, a small one. So small, I almost laughed when it happened. I slipped in the kitchen. Didn't fall hard. Didn't break anything. Just slipped. By the time I got up, I was already annoyed at myself more than anything else. But somehow they knew my daughter arrived first, then my son, too quickly, too prepared. You could have been seriously hurt, she said, her voice sharp with something that sounded like fear. But her eyes didn't match. They weren't afraid, they were certain. This is exactly what we've been talking about, my son added, exactly. Again, as if this moment, this tiny, insignificant moment, was proof of something bigger. Something they had already decided. I'm fine, I said. You're not, my daughter replied. And for the first time, I felt it, not concern, not love, control. You're not safe here anymore. Those words landed harder than any fall ever could. Not safe. In my own home, before I could argue, before I could even process what was happening, everything started moving too fast. Phone calls, appointments, discussions I wasn't included in, decisions made around me, over me, without me. It's just temporary, they said. Just until you recover. Just until we figure things out. Just such a small word for something that felt so final. The day they took me to the nursing home, I didn't fight, not because I agreed, but because I still believed them. Because somewhere deep down, I still trusted that they wouldn't hurt me, that this, whatever this was truly for my benefit. That they were still my children, and I was still their mother. The building smelled like disinfectant and something older, something resigned. The halls were quiet but not peaceful, more like emptied. Rooms filled with people who used to have lives, homes, stories, now reduced to schedules and routines and waiting, always waiting. This is nice, my daughter said. I didn't respond. Because I knew this wasn't nice. This was the beginning of something I didn't yet understand. Something I hadn't yet questioned. But something that, deep down, didn't feel right. And as I sat there in a place that wasn't mine, surrounded by people who had been placed rather than chosen to be there for the first time, a small, quiet thought began to form. What if this wasn't about helping me? What if this was about something else entirely? The first crack in their story didn't come from confrontation. It came from something small, quiet, almost accidental, a piece of paper that wasn't meant for me. By then, I had been in the nursing home long enough to understand its rhythm. The way days blurred together, measured not by purpose, but by routine. Meals arrived at the same time. Lights dimmed at the same hour. Conversations repeated themselves like echoes in a hallway that led nowhere. I had become part of that rhythm, or at least that's what they expected. But something inside me had already started to resist. It began with a woman named Leela. She wasn't staff. She wasn't family. She was something in between, a volunteer, I think. Or maybe just someone who hadn't yet learned how to look away. She noticed things, the way I watched the door. The way I hesitated every time someone mentioned visitors. The way I held onto silence like it might reveal something if I listened hard enough. You don't belong here, she said one afternoon as she sat across from me with a stack of papers in her lap. It wasn't a question. It wasn't even kind. It was certain. I almost laughed. Apparently I do, I replied. She tilted her head slightly, studying me. She said, You're just here. There's a difference. I didn't answer, because part of me already knew she was right. The real moment, the one that changed everything, came a few days later. I had been waiting for my daughter. She had promised to visit, promised. I sat near the front desk longer than I should have, watching the doors open and close, hopping each time it would be her. It never was. Eventually, one of the staff members approached me. You should head back to your room, she said gently. It's getting late. Wait a little longer, I replied. She hesitated, then nodded. And that's when I saw it, a file not mine, or at least not labeled for me, but close enough that my name caught my eye as she flipped through the pages. Property transfer, pending documentation. The words didn't fully register at first, but something about them lingered. Excuse me, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Can I see that? She frowned slightly. It's just paperwork. Still like to see it. For a moment, I thought she would refuse. Then, maybe out of habit, maybe out of exhaustion, she handed it to me. And just like that, everything shifted. It wasn't a full file, just a copy, a partial printout. But it was enough to see my name, enough to see my address, enough to see that something involving my house was in motion, without me. I felt something cold settle in my chest. What is this? I asked. She glanced at the page, then back at me. It looks like a property inquiry. Maybe your family is handling things, such a simple phrase, such a dangerous one. I never approved anything, I said. She shrugged slightly. Then it's probably just preliminary. Probably. That word echoed in my mind long after she walked away. Probably meant uncertainty. Probably meant assumption. But it also meant one very important thing. Nothing was final. Not yet. That night I didn't sleep. For the first time since I arrived, I wasn't thinking about loneliness or betrayal, or even my children. I was thinking about facts, details, truth, because something didn't make sense. If they had truly taken control, if everything was already decided, why would anything be pending? The next morning, I asked for my belongings, not all of them, just what they had brought with me, a small bag, a few clothes. And tucked into the bottom, something they must have overlooked, a folder, old, worn, but familiar. I opened it slowly, my hands steadier than they had been in weeks. Inside were copies of documents I hadn't thought about in years, the original deed, my name. Only my name, no additions, no transfers, no amendments. I read it once, then again. Then a third time, just to be sure. Nothing had changed. Nothing. The house, the one they said I could no longer manage, the one they had quietly begun handling, still belonged to me, fully, legally, undeniably. For a moment I just sat there, staring at the paper like it might disappear if I looked away. Because this wasn't just information, this was power. And they had acted as if I didn't have any. The realization didn't come as anger, not at first. It came as clarity, a sharp, precise understanding that cut through everything else. They hadn't removed me because they could. They had removed me because they thought I wouldn't fight back, because they believed I didn't know, because they assumed I was already gone. I folded the document carefully and placed it back in the folder, then I stood up. And for the first time since I had arrived, I didn't feel like I was waiting anymore. I felt like I was moving. The next step wasn't obvious, but it didn't have to be, because for the first time, I wasn't reacting to what they had done. I was preparing for what I was about to do. Leela found me later that day. "You look different," she said. "I found something," I replied, her expression sharpened instantly. "What kind of something?" "The kind that changes everything." She didn't smile, she didn't soften, she just leaned forward slightly and said, "Then don't waste it." No sympathy, no pity, just truth. And that's when I realized something else. I didn't need comfort anymore, I needed help, real help. The kind that doesn't come from family. The kind that doesn't come with hidden intentions. "I need a lawyer," I said. The words felt strange in my mouth, heavy, serious, final. Leela nodded, as if she had been waiting for me to say it. "I know someone," she said. Of course she did. Because people like her, the ones who notice, the ones who don't look away, they always seem to know exactly where the truth lives, even when everyone else is pretending it doesn't exist. 2 days later, I was sitting in a small office across from a man who didn't smile when I told him my story. He didn't interrupt. He didn't offer reassurance. He just listened, carefully, completely. And when I finished, he leaned back in his chair and said something that changed everything all over again. "They don't own your house." "Probably. It seems like. We'll have to check." "They don't own your house." Simple, direct, certain. I felt something shift inside me, not relief, not yet, something stronger, something steadier. "What they've done," he continued, "may not just be unethical." He paused. "It may be illegal." The word landed differently than anything else had because betrayal hurts, but illegality, that changes the balance, that turns emotion into evidence. "And I can prove it," he said. For the first time since all of this began, I smiled, not because I was happy, but because I understood. This wasn't over, not even close. And somewhere, in a house that still belonged to me, my children were about to find out exactly what they had underestimated.